Hi there, I'm Spencer Hughes. Welcome to another edition. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Hi, I'm Spencer Hughes, a brand new edition of The Spencer Hughes Show, Spreaker.com and SpencerHughes.net. I don't have guests often on my show, but when I do, I make sure they're people that I really, really want to have on. I get a lot of offers of people wanting to talk about a book or talk about something they're doing, a project, and although maybe worthwhile, I say no to a lot more people than I say yes to. I actually sought out Larry Winget, who's become a friend of mine, and he was a mentor for many years before that. And it's a pleasure to have him back on the show. First time visiting us on the Spreaker edition of the Spencer Hughes Show. The new book is coming out in just a few days. It's called Grow a Pair: How to Stop Being a Victim and Take Back Your Life, Your Business, and Your Sanity. Great to have you back, my friend. Welcome.
Hey, I appreciate being here, and thanks for having me on your new show.
Yes, it's you talk about this in your book, and we'll get to it, just kind of having to reset yourself and reposition yourself, and you even had to do that. You know, economy's changed, all sorts of things. Markets change, tastes change, and this is the first time I've done internet radio, and I'm having a blast. Nobody's telling me what to, not that they told me what to say before on Fox, but I've never been freer, Larry. I just wish I could make some money doing this. I haven't figured that part out yet.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, it's the first time I've done radio, and I'm having a great time, and then sometimes I get depressed because I walk out of the studio and I go, wait a minute, I'm not getting a paycheck for this. Why am I so enthusiastic? But I'm hoping...
That counts for something.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm hoping the right people will hear it, that story. But anyway, this is a great new book you have, and I'm honored to have an advanced, uncorrected proof here. And I read this in 2 days. It's a page-turner, and a great job on another book here.
I appreciate it. I really like this book, and I think maybe as much or maybe more than anything I've written before, it's a timely book. I think if there's ever a time that this book is needed, it would be right now in our country and in our society. I think we need to grow a pair. It seems to me like we're just surrounded by these weenies, sniveling, backbiting, backstabbing, gossipy. Oh my God, people, just grow a pair, stand up for yourself, stand up to others, quit sniveling, and get on with your life. And I think, boy, we need that message right now in so many areas.
No, absolutely. And as you talk about really early on in the book, because of course people get offended so easily, and not that you care so much about that, and not that I care too much about that, but you have to...
I kind of like it.
Yeah, you have to put a disclaimer in kind of for... I don't want to say the stupid people, but I'll say it anyway. I guess for some of the kind of maybe the slower people who don't get what you're trying to say here. You're not talking about machismo here. You're not talking about anatomy. You're talking about what kind of a pair that people need to grow.
A mental pair. Growing a pair is not about what's going on between your legs. It's what's going on between your ears. It's about getting the right attitude about your life and your principles and what you believe in and what you stand for, so you're able to speak up for yourself, speak up for others who can't speak up for themselves, speak up to people who need to be stood up to. It's about being willing to live a life that is very, very principled and based in integrity and honor and dignity. You remember, like we used to live and be proud of, like our parents' generation and their parents' generation. And somehow along the way, we just lost all that. So this is a reminder to get back a position of strength within our own lives.
Absolutely. And I love the part where you talk briefly about your father and how you were raised to have a pair. And I look back now, Larry, and for a long time, I guess into even my college years, my father would do things that would really, really embarrass me. And at the time, I'd blush, and sometimes I'd walk away from the table because we'd be at a restaurant. And he still does this, but it doesn't bother me as much, especially in light of reading your book. I kind of tolerate it more. But he'd call the waiter over or snap his fingers or, do kind of the cliched, garçon, come over here. And they'd come over and he would just chew them out. But he would never chew them out because he was in a bad mood. He would never chew them out just to chew them out. It was because of terrible service. It's because there was a piece of glass in the food. I remember, Larry, once he ordered a salad and he got to the bottom of this thing. True story, in San Francisco. He got to the bottom of this yummy salad only to find a cigar butt at the bottom of the salad. I guess the chef was smoking in the kitchen and dropped it while he was making the salad. Can you believe that? I couldn't believe it.
Now, if that happened these days, Can
Oh,
you see
yeah.
this guy would be? Your dad would be on every major news channel. He could shoot a little video with his iPhone, and it would go viral. It would be famous.
Yeah, plus I wouldn't have to worry about money, I guess. Huh? I'd have a nice inheritance on top of that. But he bit into glass with his teeth. I mean, these were the old days where like you just called the manager over and you schooled him basically. And now everyone's so tolerant of terrible service. I have to admit I'm a little bit softer spoken than my father was when I was growing up, but I'm starting to not be. And you have to speak up. You spend a good chunk of the book talking about how we treat people, we train people how to treat us. We train people, whether it's our spouse, whether it's our children, whether it's the waiter or waitress at our favorite restaurant, the bus driver, whoever it is, we train them how to treat us. And by and large, a good segment of this society is training people the wrong way, and we're getting stepped all over, aren't we?
Well, yeah, I think most people could change their name to Matt, like doormat. I really do, because we do get walked on at every level. If we get bad service, we should speak up about bad service. I think if you get bad service and you don't do anything about it, you're really sort of contributing to the problem. It's almost like you're an accessory to the crime because you're not fixing it for the next guy. If I get bad service, it's probably because the guy right before me got bad service and he didn't do anything about it. If I get bad service, I'm a lot like your dad. I don't attack a human being, first of all, ever in any of my books. I never attack people. I attack behavior.
Yep.
So if I'm in a restaurant, I make it about the behavior. I make it about the thing. I think that's the only way to argue. That's the only way to be a reasonable human being, is to always keep it about what's gone wrong. Stupid is as stupid does. Attack what people do, not who they are. And so I think you have to speak up at all levels all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And my wife's, and she was happy to see she wasn't too sure about the title of your book. It's kind of funny. She approached it with a little, with a little suspicion. She goes, "What does he mean by that?" I'm like, and she loved the part where you put in kind of the disclaimer that there are some men that that have a small pair, and there's women that have bigger pairs than men. And she liked that little disclaimer in there because she has a big pair. She doesn't take garbage from anyone. We were in a restaurant, Larry, and this poor waitress, somebody had called in sick at the last second. This poor woman was maybe 19, 20 years old. She's totally overwhelmed, has three sections of table she's waiting on all by herself. And there's this woman who's like Nurse Ratched at a table next to us, just snapping her fingers and where's my food, and this is cold, and this is too hot, and this isn't right, and da-da-da-da-da. And we're looking, and we're ready to blow a gasket. And finally, my wife at the end of the meal stands. First of all, she told the waitress, "By the way, you're doing a great job. Don't let that woman get to you." And I was wondering, is my wife going to say anything to that woman on the way out? And she did, Larry. You would have been proud. She got up and she says, "You know what? It's only food. Relax. This woman's by herself. She's understaffed. Just relax already." And the husband looked kind of relieved, like, "Oh my God, that's great that somebody finally stood up to my wife," because he wasn't standing up to her.
Yeah, because he doesn't have enough of a pair to stand up. That's for darn sure. And I'm glad you pointed that out that in the book, and I talk about how my wife is the sweetest woman in the world. She would have to be to put up with a person like me. Believe it or not, Larry Winget is not an easy man to live with, but. And yet she has a pair too. It's not about being loud. It's not about being arrogant. It's not about, like you said, all the masculine stuff. It's about confidence. It's about knowing who you are and how far you'll go and where you're going to draw a line in the sand and maybe a line in the concrete. And I think one of the problems we have right now in our country and in our society, and that individuals have, is they don't really know what they stand for. I ask people early on in the book, and I leave places in all of my books for people to write because I want every book I write to be like a workbook. But I want people to give it a moment's thought and say, what do you believe in so much that you won't compromise for anyone at any time, at any level? In my life, I won't be lied to. I just won't. You lie to me, I'll cut you off at the knees, and you'll never get a chance with me again. You can tell me the worst news. You can tell me anything. And we will work it out. But if you lie to me, you're dead to me. You will be honest with me, especially in business dealings. I can get over a disaster. I will not get over a dishonesty.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's what I stand for. And I ask everybody, what do you stand for? And it's interesting to say, okay, I want you to write down 3 things that you stand for. And they just go, I got nothing.
Isn't that amazing? I mean, they could tell you all the ball scores, they could tell you all the stuff that's going on in pop culture, all the movies, but they can't tell you what their desires are and what their principles are.
Yeah, I think it's just sad. In fact, I think it's pitiful. So we kind of start there. If you're going to have a pair, you got to know what you believe in, what you stand for, and what you'll never compromise. And so that's why I sort of get the whole book started. I want people to identify that. I would ask that your listeners right now to just kind of pause and say, man, great question. What do I stand for? And know what you really believe in to the point that you'll never give in, never give in on those principles. What a great thing if all of us in our society said, you know, we believe this, and I'm not afraid to say it. I don't care whose feelings it hurts. I don't care whether you like what I have to say. I would also like it if you stand up to me, Spencer, and say, I believe this, and I believe just the opposite. I think growing a pair is for us to look each other in the eye and say, I can't stand what you said. I disagree with everything that you believe in, but I respect your right to have that opinion and articulate it well.
Well, Larry, how did we go from fighting and defeating Nazis to being the wussified society we are now? I'm just wondering how it didn't take 1,000 years of evolution. It didn't take 100 years of mistakes. This is happening really before our very eyes. It's happening right before our eyes. I mean, our parents' generation was much stronger. They had a bigger pair than we do on average. And I'm worried because I have 6 kids. I know you have kids, Larry. What is, and you talk a lot about this, and we'll talk about another book briefly that people could check out where you focus on children. It's one of my favorites of yours. We'll talk about that in a bit. But I'm really worried, not so much even for our generation, but our kids. I've got kids almost 17 and almost 6 and ages in between. And I see the kind of world they're living in. And you talk about it in this book. And we have to be stern with our kids. We have to let them know what's ahead. We can't keep lying to our children. But how did this devolve so quickly from a generation that defeated Nazis and won World War II to not being able to take a stand on anything?
Well, I think a lot of things got to us. And, you know, when you really look at that time frame, it's about 40 years. And look at what's happened in the last 40 years. We've become the most entitled society on the planet. How did that happen? How did we become so entitled? You know, I look at and I bring this up in the book, I look at my own industry, which is the personal development industry. And I know you've listened to everybody, just like I have. I've listened to all of them. I know most of the people in the personal development industry. I even know some of the old guys who are now long gone because I've been doing this a while. And we took this great message. The original personal development self-help message was one of empowerment. And it was one that said, you deserve the very best because you have the ability to go out and work and accomplish whatever you believe you can do based on your willingness and your abilities and so forth. That is a message of empowerment. And we bastardized that message away from empowerment to entitlement, from you deserve the best because you have the ability to go do it, to I deserve the best and I'm entitled for everybody to bring it to me.
And that's what our kids are learning. That's what they see on the TV. That's what they see everywhere.
That's right. We're teaching our kids that. We're teaching them that that's acceptable. And it's going to take parents with a pair to say, no, that's not how it works. And then you look at what else has happened in our society. We've become so politically correct. I think the most castrating thing that's happened in our society is political correctness.
Oh, I agree.
You can't say anything to anyone. You know, and I point out a lot of the incredibly stupid things that are going on in the world today. I pointed out one that is just ridiculous. I think it's hilarious, though. That in Australia, they don't let Santa Clauses say ho, 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 because we all know what that is.
Unreal.
You know what a ho is. You can't have them say ho, ho, ho. Santa Claus has got to say ha, ha, ha. Are you kidding me?
I couldn't believe that. That was one example even I had missed. I mean, it just gets more and more crazy. You can't make this stuff up.
Nope, you can't. And so we've got all this political correctness that you can't say anybody's an idiot anymore, even though they are an idiot. And I get attacked a lot for saying that. You know, I wrote a book called People Are Idiots, and I can prove it. Easiest book I ever wrote. Anybody could write that book. Idiots are everywhere. But you can't say anything to anyone. They want to change the fact that we have the Founding Fathers and just call them the Founders because Founding Fathers is sexist. Well, guess what, folks? They were men.
Yeah, I don't know if I mean, not to be sexist.
That's just a fact. That's not an opinion. That's not Spencer Hughes and Larry Winget going, we're sexist. We're going to call them men because, oh, wait, they were men. So we've got to get away from all this stupid political correctness. We've got to get back to being open and being able to communicate, and I don't have to protect your feelings. The problem is we have people, everybody it seems like I talk to, and everybody who responds to me on Facebook, everybody thinks it's about them. Guess what? 99.99% of the time, it has nothing to do with you. Nothing.
Yeah.
I don't give a damn about you. Nobody gives a damn about me. That's the way it really is. They're just living their lives out here, doing their best to take care of themselves. And some people are looking to get their feelings hurt. You know, we have people who sue people for what they say to them on Facebook. Really? I grew up hearing sticks and stones will break your bones, but words will never hurt me.
I was cheering that out loud, Larry, when I read that part of your book, because I am trying to teach my kids that. My almost 15-year-old stepson today came home saying there's a kid at school who's a real jerk, and just kind of messing around with him. And I go, well, you know, you have our permission. If he lays a finger on you, you have our permission to just, mow him to the ground, but never start the fight. But what's going on? And he's calling him names and things. And I thought of that immediately, and I just read that part of your book yesterday. Why aren't we teaching our kids this anymore? I think a lot of the bullying going on, Larry, as you mentioned in the book, is bad, and it's different because there's the internet now. And when you and I were kids, we weren't bullied over texts and instant messages and chat rooms and video, conferences and things like that. It's new ways to bully. But I think the main difference isn't the technology. It's in the way the kids handled the bully, right?
My mama used to say, consider the source, Larry. I mean, I heard that a million times when I got my feelings hurt. Consider the source. And so people say horrible things to me now, and I just consider the source. I don't make it about me. I'm confident in who I am. I'll let it be about them. And I think that's what we have to teach our kids. And you were talking about the internet and so forth. Let's go ahead and get into kids, because this one's really hot with me, and probably everybody that's listening to you has kids.
Sure.
But it's just the internet. They're just words on a machine. It's not like even somebody, at least in the old days when I was a kid, they would come up to me and look me in the eye and say something, and I had to either choose to accept it or not accept it, and do something about it or not do something about it. Now somebody sends a text and we're all butthurt? Are you kidding me? It's just silly to me.
And another thing, Larry, that I think is different too is that back in the day when we were growing up, kids popped the bully in the teeth. You knocked the bully's teeth out if you had to, and the bully just said, he got humbled real quick and said, oh gosh, I don't want this to happen. I'm going to get out of here. But now we teach kids that they have to accept the bully. They can't talk back to the bully. Our kids went to a school and still go to a school where the policy, can you believe this? The policy was whether you start the fight or you're defending yourself, if someone else throws the first punch or you do, you're treated the same way. You're both suspended.
Well, that's ridiculous. That's stupid. It's wrong.
Yeah, so it's encouraging kids to get beat to a pulp. I mean, that's a dangerous policy to have, and I'm not raising my children that way. I'm raising them with their mom's blessing, too, that if somebody throws a punch at you, you nail them. You're not going to just sit there and turn the other cheek and get beat up.
Exactly. And my dad taught me early on, it's better to nurse a bloody nose than it is to nurse your dignity. You stand up for yourself. And never let anybody belittle you or put you down or talk negatively to you like that or lay a hand on you. That's wrong. And we shouldn't expect that of our kids. What we have to understand about bullies in society, you can't legislate bullies out. You can't do it. No rule that any school comes up with is going to get rid of bullies. There's a bully every time you get in your car and pull onto the street. There will be a bully there who will pull out in front of you and cut you off in traffic and change lanes without signaling and do all that kind of stuff. They're bullies. They're bullies in businesses. Every business has them. Every association has them. Company has them. Every little group, every church has bullies. There are bullies everywhere. Let me tell you the only way to defuse a bully. Stop being a victim. If you don't have a victim, you cannot have a bully.
Yeah, when they were running around the schoolyard, they'd say, oh, the girls are chasing me or somebody's chasing me on the playground. I said, well, stop. Don't run. Have you ever been chased when you're standing still?
Not running, right?
And they couldn't get their head around that one, that it was that easy to not be chased. I go, well, if you just stop, where are they going to go? Are they going to run around you in circles? I mean, they're going to lose interest and they're going to go away.
Exactly. I don't think we can teach people not to be bullies. I just really don't. And besides that, I think that's the wrong area of focus. I think we should be focusing on teaching people not to be a victim. I'll guarantee you I can teach a kid not to be a victim quicker than I can teach a kid not to be a bully.
Absolutely. Now, the first part of your book is basically what it means to grow a pair, and you give examples of. Now, I want to talk about one example before we move on kind of to the next section, because people think it's interesting that I'm a huge, not that because I'm a huge fan of yours, but because I have books of yours on my bookshelf, but then I've got, Norman Vincent Peale, I've got Wayne Dyer, I respect all these other people too. Not all of them in the self-help movement and the positive thinking movement, because you talk about one who we both know led to people dying. So, I mean, there's a lot of charlatans out there. I mean, I can't believe people would even try to do stuff like that. I mean, at that point, they become a guru. I mean, you're not even a best-selling author at that point. You're like a god to these people, I guess. But
yeah, that's a messiah complex. And that's when the message is not as important as you are. And these guys who put themselves in front of the message, that's a person with a messiah complex. And there are a bunch of them out there.
Yeah. Now, how do I reconcile? Because people say, well, Larry's not a big fan, as you know, of a lot of these people, the whole law of attraction thing. And I love, by the way, how you just, you don't mince words with anything. And you just kind of go out there and you call these people what they are, in your opinion. And they're just kind of, well, tell us how you describe them. I mean, some of these motivational people and people just say, take a deep breath and visualize something and it'll turn up on your doorstep tomorrow.
Well, I just in general refer to them as the motivational bozos. And I know all these guys really pretty well. And I know some of those bad guys really pretty well. And the most popular blog I ever wrote, and it's had, many, many hits and been shared a lot, is one that says the secret is a total load of crap. And I believe that. The problem with all of those people is that they rarely put work in the equation. The secret says what you think about and talk about comes about. I believe what you think about, talk about, and get off your ass and do something about is what comes about. And so I'm very much into putting action to everything. I don't think you can think your way to success or positive attitude your way to success. I think the best component in the law of attraction, the most attractive thing you can do, is work. And so I'm really a proponent of people taking action and not just trying to get caught up in all this happy talk. So I'm sort of anti-happy talk. But you know what's really interesting? If I had to look at all the guys out there that I really admire, I really admire and am very much in alignment with Wayne Dyer. And you would think, oh my goodness, Wayne Dyer and Larry Winget are 180 degrees. No, we're not. I'm a big fan of Dyer, and I've read all of his books, and I've heard him lecture, and if he ever comes close, I always go see him lecture. I'll tell you one thing I heard Dyer say from the stage one time, and my wife elbowed me and said, it's you. He said, there's a fine line between asshole and guru. And he said, and I walk that line every day. And my wife pokes me and she said, you walk that line too. And I said, you're right, I do. Because he has opinions that he doesn't apologize for. He has a pair. You don't have to agree with him, and I don't agree with everything he says. But the point is he has opinions, he has thoughts, he has research, he backs his ideas up. He's strong, it's honest, he has integrity. That's a person I admire, even though I don't always agree with him. What a great way for us all to be, I think.
Oh, absolutely. And I have, you two are among my biggest mentors, by the way. Seriously, I want to come out and see you one of these days, but I've met Dr. Dyer a couple of times, and I do think you have more things in common than not. And I think I never had a chance to meet him. He died before I got into his work, but you remind me a lot of more of a Jim Rohn than some of these other guys, because Jim Rohn was not about the law of attraction. He wasn't about, daydreaming about this stuff. It was about hard work like you. It was blood, sweat, and tears, and a farmer's son, who grew up,
teacher. You're right.
He grew up on the Snake River in Idaho, and he was stone cold broke, and he didn't even have shoes, he said, until I think he was like 10 years old. He had his first pair of shoes, and he died a multimillionaire, successful man, loved by millions. And it was through hard work. He never said, close your eyes and tap your heels together and everything's going to work out, And a lot of these people do.
Rohn taught me more than anybody else. He has been my biggest mentor, my biggest teacher. I was able to be around him a few times, and I introduced him at a big conference one time, and I really admired everything that he taught, because he taught principles. And really very early on, when you look at the industry, when you look at speakers, when you look at the writers and so forth, you say you can take a tactical approach. that says, when this happens, you do this. Well, the problem, if you base all of your teaching on tactics, that when this happens, you do this, well, what if this never happens?
Right, right.
And so tactics are maybe not a great way to go. At least they didn't make sense for me. And Rohn taught principles, because principles always work. And that's what I decided early on I was going to do, is I was going to speak on principles. My principles, and when you look at every one of my books, and if you've read them all like you have, my principles for parenting are the very same principles that I talk about it takes to be a great leader. They're the very same principles. I just talk about how you can use those principles in a different way within your family with little kids as you do within an industry and with your employees. But the principles are the same. Communication, education, discipline, rules, all that sort of, they're all the same principles. And so you can talk about principles, and just like I do in this book, and if you build your life on principles, you never have to worry about a situation. Nothing's situational when you're dealing with principles. And he taught that. I believe I teach that. And then him, like me, we were both big on making lists. I mean, write it down.
Now, Larry, obviously it's best to start as a young child growing up to have a strong pair, but as you talk about in your book, it's never really too late, right? Anyone is capable, even if you're the biggest so-called wuss or you've been kind of run over by everybody in your life, you can make that change, right? Just because you've been run over most of your life doesn't mean you can't stop, put your foot down and say, you know what, I'm growing a pair now. I might be 50 years old and growing a pair. I might be a teenager and doing it. Now, preferably, you raise kids to be thick-skinned from a young age, and then this all comes hopefully a second nature. But talk about that. What does it take to grow a pair? Maybe you're 25 years old, you're 30, you're 50, or even later in life. Is it ever too late?
No, it's never too late. And what you just described, boy, it would be great if we all taught our kids right and they all had a pair from the time when they were kids, but that's not going to happen. Realistically, right now, we have a society of let's say, 20 to 30-year-olds who don't have a pair. That's where we've really fallen apart, I think, is that age range right there. That's why for the very first time in history, we have 60% of adult parents who are still supporting in some financial way their adult children. That's the worst it's ever been. We have that generation in there. And then the problem with that 20 to 30, 35-year-olds, they're having kids like they are prone to do, and you were prone to do, and I were prone to do. And what are they raising? And so we've got young adults who simply don't have a pair, and they just kind of go along to get along, and that's where the entitlement really comes through. And you can break the cycle, like you said. There's a lot of steps I take people through to break the cycle. And the very first one I've got in here is really just speak up. I mean, come on, if you have an opinion, speak up. I'm so tired of people. You and I, not a problem. I mean, if you and I shut up, we're out of business.
It's true.
But, I'm just amazed at people see so much wrong. NBC's got that show, What Would You Do? Isn't that what it's called? I forgot what it's called. But I know everybody has seen the show where, it's called What Would You Do? And where people are sitting like in a restaurant and they'll see a man slap a woman. It's all set up.
Oh,
and
yeah. They have the hidden cameras.
Or they'll watch a person in a restaurant reach over and steal somebody's iPhone or their money out of their purse when they go to the bathroom. Or they'll sit in a park and watch a car being vandalized and nobody says anything. And think of all and people go, well, those are pretty extreme. Okay, let's rule the extremes out. When you're walking down the street and you watch some jerk walking in front of you, pull out a piece of gum, take it out of the wrapper, and throw the gum wrapper on the ground, do you say anything about it? Do you? Why not? People need to learn to speak up.
Now, what about, Larry, just to play devil's advocate, but I agree with you. What about the devil's advocate? Well, it's a meaner world today, and there's psychopaths everywhere. We've got shooters in theaters and schools, and I don't know if that guy's mentally unstable or if the guy slaps a woman, how do I know the guy's not going to pull a gun on me or something? Do you think that's a valid excuse?
No, not for me it wouldn't. Yeah. It wouldn't be a valid excuse for me. If a man slaps a woman, I'm going to be there to defend the woman. And I think that's what I was raised to do that. I don't concern myself that, he might slap me back or he might pull a gun. I'll just have to take the risk because sometimes you just do the right thing. You just got to do the right thing. And especially, start with the little things. Start with the jerk who's throwing this paper down in front of you, or the jerk that's smoking a cigarette, just throws a cigarette butt. What, he couldn't walk right over there? I
Yeah.
mean, you see it all the time in the mall. Go to the food court in the mall,
Ugh.
and people eat their food in the food court, and they can't be bothered to walk 6 feet to put their trash in a trash can. They just walk away. Are you kidding me? Do you say anything about it? I do.
Yeah, it's one of my biggest pet peeves. I got one for you here, Larry, that the minute I saw it, I thought of you, and I was glad that the interview was coming up because I wanted to talk about it with you. I was in San Francisco over the weekend visiting my father with my two daughters, and we went to a museum down by the pier, and they were handing out brochures. Great way to start your, kind of like the anti-elephant people in the circus handing your kids propaganda the minute they go into Ringling Brothers, right? Just what you need to have them have a coloring book on how the elephants are tortured when they're about to have cotton candy, right? A real mood destroyer. So we're going into the museum, and the guy at the door, before you buy the tickets, handed a brochure out, and I thought it was just like a map of the place. And it's this whole screed on how poorly treated they are working there, and how they're going to be there's going to be a bunch of layoffs, and just all this brutal stuff that's going to happen to the employees, and the evil man who's running the show. And every display that we went to in this place had a pre-printed, it was a nice fancy thing that looked almost like it belonged on the display. And that's what the intention was, for you to read it and say, oh, okay. And then you're reading the propaganda before you even know it. But here's what it said. It said, this display was built and maintained by an employee who's about to be laid off. And it gives a website or something. And I thought of you immediately, and I thought, wah, wah, wah. I think I even tweeted about it. And I said, you know what? This is what's wrong with America. I got laid off back in February, and I didn't put stickers on people's cars griping about it. I put stickers everywhere saying what a victim I was. What are your thoughts on that, on kind of malcontent employees who think they're about to be laid off? Maybe they won't even be laid off. Putting stickers on display saying this display built by someone about to lose their job.
Well, if I found somebody putting that sign out there, I would help facilitate that process.
Yeah, me too.
I would fire them, and they would no longer work there. You never bite the hand that feeds you. I had such an issue with all these fast food workers and all the Walmart. Even though we know the Walmart, that was a union coming in and fighting. The Walmart employees weren't near as upset about their wages as the union was. But the fast food workers are wanting nearly twice as much. I mean, that crap bothers me. It really does. You take a job, you know the deal when you take the job. If you didn't like the deal, you shouldn't have taken the job. And never come in and complain and do a poor job and whine to the customer who's keeping your business open. If you don't like the job, get a different one, because I'll guarantee you, I can find somebody as the employer. If I open up any job there, I'll have 1,000 people who want that job tomorrow. 1,000 people.
My oldest son is almost 17. He's looking for work right now, and he feels like I'm lecturing him, and I kind of am, but I think of your graduation videos that you do that are brilliant, and people can find those on YouTube and your website, where you're kind of giving the valedictorian speech to the graduating class. But I tell him, and he gets kind of upset when I say it, but I feel like I can't say it enough. It's not enough to just drop your application off and walk away. You have to talk to the manager. You got to shake their hand, look them in the eye. You got to let him or her know why you should be hired over the, like you said, 1,000 people that are looking for that job too. What advice would you give to young people in terms of growing a pair when it comes to entering, maybe their first job?
Well, what you just said is very important. And I get that question a lot about people who are unemployed. First of all, passive employment searches, passive ones don't work. You can't sit at your computer and go on jobs.com and monster.com and all the websites and keep sending out resumes. That doesn't get people employed. What does work is just what you said. When you're knocking on doors face to face with a well-written manuscript, resume that looks great, is articulate, and you walk in and you shake people's hand and you look them in the eye and you present yourself well and you dress for better than the job is. I always think you go dressed better than the job is that you're looking for, and you know how to talk to people. That impresses them, because very few people will go to those links today. And also understand when you go in that you need to know about the company that you're working for. If an employer, the first thing I would ask as an employer is what do you know about my company? If you can't answer that question, I don't want to talk to you. But it means
Sure.
you don't care enough about the job to do your research.
That's a
And
great
so
point.
there's some little things like that you can do. If I were an employer today, interviewing people, I would say, what 5 books are you reading? Tell me the last book you read, because I don't want people who aren't doing anything to stay educated. I want to know that they're really doing their best to stay up with what's going on. And I would tell all kids right now who are in the workforce, watch what you put on social media. Nobody wants to see you doing shots of Jaeger.
They don't think it gets out there because they're not thinking because they're teenagers, but their teachers are seeing this stuff. Other parents are seeing this stuff. Their own parents are seeing it. I'm
Yeah,
amazed
your
at how
own
many,
parents need to be stopping it.
yeah, exactly. But they don't think that. They don't think an employer could be looking them up, and a lot of them just use their real names innocently enough when they go on Twitter and Facebook. They don't think that someone could just type in their name and see everything that they've griped about over the last 6 months or a year.
Yep, you're exactly right.
Now, one of the areas I have to admit I'm struggling with, and it's been really hard, and you and I have talked about this off the air a little bit, is kind of the money situation. You talk about, I'm glad you spent a whole section in the book on growing a pair with your money. Why do so many people blow that area, Larry, when it's so important? And I'm guilty of that myself. I'm not doing the best that I've done right now. I know I'm going to come back stronger than ever, but I'm kind of in a slump. But why do so many people suffer in that particular area of money?
For
Poor
lots of
decisions.
reasons, Spencer, but I think one of the main reasons is we're not taught about money. Very few kids understand how money works and interest and bills and budgeting. They've never been taught how to budget with a pen and a paper and how to write things down. This is how much I make. This is how much after taxes. This is who I owe. This is what an interest rate is. This is what it means. These are the upsides of paying your bills on time, and this is what can happen when you don't pay your bills on time. They don't know about credit ratings and credit scores and what that means in terms of getting a job. They don't understand what that means about how later you will pay more for a house or your next car or whatever if you're not taking care of your bills today. They just haven't been taught. So that's, I think, where it starts. And that's the first thing parents can do is teach your kids about money, which means you probably need to learn some things about money. Every parent needs to know more about money so they can actually teach their kids. But you have to involve your kids in the family finances so they understand. And then you have to get honest with yourself about what a need is, what a want is, and what a I can't live without this really is. It's amazing what people can live without. The problem is they watch TV on their big flat screen, and then they're watching their 4 HBO channels and their 8 Cinemax channels. We won't even get into that. But they watch Keeping Up with the Kardashians, and they think they have to keep up with the Kardashians. The problem is we think we can live that lifestyle and that we deserve that lifestyle. It goes back to entitlement. I'm entitled to that lifestyle, whether I can afford it or not. And by the way, if I can't afford it, people will throw credit cards at me and I can max those out. I can't walk into the Gap without them saying, would you like to open up a credit card and save 10%? Now, people will buy a $40 t-shirt and open up a credit card to save $4, knowing that the interest on that is going to be more than $4, but they're not that smart. So they get that credit card, and then they've got them all at all the stores in town, and they're in trouble.
Well, my dream car is a Porsche, and you talk about it in the book that you had a Porsche. Tell us that story, because I had never heard that story from you before, that you had this car in your garage and you wanted it so badly, and what happened? You ended up not driving it much, right?
Yeah, I really wanted a Porsche. For me, that was going to be my symbol of prosperity when I finally made it big. And I didn't make it big, and I went and I paid cash for this little hot 911 convertible. I mean, it was just, oh my goodness, it was pretty little thing, and I drove the hell out of it for about a year. But, I'm a good old Oklahoma redneck. I drive a pickup truck. I still do drive a black pickup truck. And so what I was most comfortable driving was my pickup. And so my wife had her car, and then I had this hot little sporty Porsche, and I had my pickup. Well, I would walk around the Porsche every day to get to the pickup to drive it. And my wife walked in one day after 2 years, and I put 2 sets of tires and 3 batteries in this Porsche while it sat in my garage. I live in Arizona. It's
Oh, the
hot.
heat. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and you can run through batteries and run through tires and never drive your car. Just because it's hot, they'll rot.
Wow.
And she pointed out, she checked the mileage. She said, Larry, in 2 years, you've driven your car 700 miles. Well, that's kind of disgusting. It even bothered me. And my symbol of prosperity kind of became this symbol of stupidity, that I was so caught up in something that really meant nothing. And so I sold it.
Well, you're not telling people at the end of the story that your wife suggested you give the car to me because I would make good use of it. I'd drive it around.
So really, the rest of the story is I had a Harley. I rode in one day, and my wife was standing in the garage, and I said, somebody's going to run over me out there. I'm getting to be afraid. And then I went on the road, and she called and she said, how much you want for that Harley? There's a guy here working on the garage doors, and he wants to buy it. And I said, well, I don't think I really wanted to sell it. She said, oh, come on, give me a price. So I named a ridiculous price. She went out and told him. He said, okay. And I never saw my Harley again. And then the Porsche thing came up, and I said, yeah, you're right. I ought to sell it. And I went on the road, and a week later I came back, and she had sold it. So I've learned, don't go on the road. My wife will sell my toys.
Now, another section you talk about growing a pair, I think it's very important for us to touch on a little bit, is growing a pair at home. And that is so hard for so many people, whether it's a spouse, whether it's a child, maybe even a parent that's living with you. Let's talk about the importance of growing a pair with the people that we live with every day and why that's so important.
Well, that's maybe the toughest part. I don't know you very well. I have no problem telling you what I think of you. And if I'm walking a business, I'll probably never see you again. So I have no problem telling you what I think of you. But, I got to go to bed with her at night. And I got to wake up with her in the morning. And so I will probably tread a little lighter around that. But I think from the very get-go that couples should demand open and honest communication from each other. I really do. I don't think you have to be hurtful, and that's kind of what we started this whole conversation with, that you keep it about the thing, not about the person. I think that's the biggest mistakes people make in a marriage and in a relationship, is that it gets personal. And arguments and standing up to your spouse and standing up for yourself with your spouse should always be about things and not about who you are or who they are. So that's the first thing, open, honest communications. In terms of your kids, you got to grow a pair and be a parent. They don't need a friend. They need a parent. And kids feel more freedom and they feel safer when there are boundaries built around them. There were studies, there was a study that was done on elementary schools that used fences. And this was several years ago. And when an elementary school playground had a fence around it, kids played right up to the edge of the fence and would lean on the fence. You probably did this when you were a kid, if your elementary school had a fence. And you went out and you stood at the fence. And when they took the fences down, the boundaries down, they didn't feel as safe, they were not as comfortable, and they stayed right up next to the building.
Wow,
and the message is that when we establish boundaries for our children, they feel safer, and they'll go right out to the edge of the boundaries because they know that you setting the boundaries, you are there to protect them with those boundaries. And so it's a good thing to have boundaries for your kids and communicate what they are and communicate the consequences when you don't get what you expect from them. That's also very important. Communicate consequences and then deliver on those consequences.
And we don't have enough of that. I mean, I was in the store yesterday, and I saw this woman with 2 children at Target, and the kids were just having a complete meltdown in the middle of the store. And I've had that happen too, and I deal with it. I the few times that it happened, I took the kids straight outside, and that was the end of it. I wasn't going to expose people to this horror, right? Why do you think so many parents, I couldn't believe this woman. She looked like kind of a soccer mom. She looked like she might have been well-educated, well-to-do. I mean, she didn't look patently, stupid or ignorant. And her kids are literally on the floor, kicking on the linoleum, and she's doing nothing. She's not reprimanding them. She's not correcting them. Is that a parent that doesn't have a pair, that has kids totally melting down Chernobyl levels at Target and does nothing? I'm just wondering, what do you think of that when you see kids doing that?
Without a pair, for sure. I was going through security the other day at the airport, and there was this about a 10-year-old kid with his mom and dad, and he just kept flopping down. And he was in front of me, and I mean right behind me, and he just kept flopping down on the floor. And finally, he got up there, and he was supposed to take his shoes off, and they kept saying, "Come on, Billy, take your shoes off. Take your shoes off. We've got to have your shoes off to go through here. Put your backpack up there. Be sure to take your toothpaste out." And they were just telling this kid what to do. And finally, he turned around and screamed at his mother and dad, "Give me an effing break." Screamed it at him. And I wheeled around and I just thought, oh my God, I'm 60 years old. I still wouldn't be able to sit down if I'd said that to my dad.
And then you wonder how they talk to their parents in private, right? I mean, if they mouth off in public.
And the father looked up at me and I said, what's amazing is he still has his teeth. And the dad just looked at me and I said, I can't believe you're going to let your kid by with that. And then I just kept going. I mean, I was just astounded. You know, if I posted today on Facebook, it was an advertisement for the book. I said, if you eat cold food in a restaurant, or if you let your kids talk back to you, you don't have a pair. Those are just two examples. But I think the most important one is if you let your kids talk back to you, you don't have a pair.
We have to wrap up here, unfortunately, and I appreciate your time, Larry, as always. But one of the stories that I just loved in your book was the anecdote you shared about going into the restaurant. And the waiter came up, and one of the first things out of his mouth was, don't expect service to be so great. I'm having kind of a bad day. Could you please share that with the listeners? Because that story is golden.
It's one of my very favorite stories. I tell it in all my speeches. I go into a restaurant with some friends, and we all sit down, and first thing out of the mouth of the waiter when he walks up is, he says, "Don't expect very good service tonight. I'm having a really bad day. Now, what can I get you?" So I immediately turned and I said, "You can get me a new waiter." And he just looks at me and says, "What?" I said, "Get me a new waiter." He said, "Sir, I can't do that. You see, this is my table." I said, "Now, you see, that's where you're confused. This is my table. Amen. I'm paying for this table, which means I get to decide what happens here. You go get me a new waiter." So he wanders off. Pretty soon, here comes a manager. Manager walks over and says, "Is there a problem?" And I said, no problem at all. Just get me a new waiter and we'll be fine. He said, "Why do you want a new waiter?" I said, "Listen, the guy walks up. The very first thing out of his mouth is, don't expect very good service. I'm having a really bad day." How stupid would I be as a customer to pay for bad service that I have been promised in advance? And the manager looks at me, shakes his head, and said, "He really is having a bad day." And see, the point is, we don't care what kind of day anybody is having. It's about us, especially when it comes to spending our money. It's about us. And we all need to grow a pair in that situation. I know 99% of the people that guy would have walked up to and said, "Don't expect very good service. I'm having a bad day." And so many people have said, "Oh, honey, that's too bad. What's going on?" Like we care.
Or leave a bigger tip to compensate.
Exactly.
And that reminds me, actually, Larry, when I heard that story, I thought that waiter, we could substitute that waiter for our children and all the accommodating parents who, like the kids say, "I'm having a bad day today." Even my own children do this sometimes. "I don't want to go to school. I'm having a bad morning." I'm like, well, your boss isn't going to care someday, and you talk about that too. Your boss isn't going to give two tosses whether you're having a bad day or you have a headache or you woke up on the wrong side of the bed. You got to clock in like everybody else and put in a productive day's work.
You're exactly right. Nobody cares what kind of day you're having when you're in the real world and you have to earn a living. And I get hired a year in advance usually to give speeches. And I'll guarantee you it doesn't matter that morning whether I've got a headache or don't feel good or whether I'm sick and throwing up and got the flu. I don't know that a year in advance, but I've been paid, and there are hundreds of people counting on me, maybe thousands of people counting on me, and it doesn't matter. I've got to show up and deliver on my word. And that's what we need to be teaching our kids. It doesn't matter how you feel. You'll feel better in a few minutes or tomorrow anyway. Suck it up and do what is expected of you. I have one major rule in life. Do what you said you would do, when you said you would do it, the way you said you would do it. That's all anybody ever wants from us. That's what your boss wants from you. That's what you want from your boss. That's what your kids want from the parents, and that's what parents want from the kids. We all want everybody we come in contact with to do what they said they would do, when they said they would do it, the way they said they would do it.
And by the way, you can get all of Larry's books on Amazon, but also right from LarryWinget.com, WINGET, LarryWinget.com. And one of my favorites of yours is Your Kids Are Your Own Fault. And if anyone wants kind of a more in-depth look at that subject of how we raise our children and how we're responsible largely for how they turn out, that's a great book. That's one of my favorites of yours.
I think that's the most important book I ever wrote. I like my books. I think all of them serve a good purpose, and I've got books about personal finance and books about business and personal development, and then this book about grow a pair, about standing up. But the most important book I ever wrote is the parenting book, to teach people that if you want to fix society, you got to start with your kids. You got to start with the kids. You got to teach them how to handle their money. You got to teach them how to handle sex and relationships and to grow a pair and how to have a work ethic and all that. That's where we have let down the world, is because we've let down our kids and we haven't taught them what they need to know to survive and thrive.
Now, Larry, I don't see it right away on your website. Please tell me it's not out of print. One of my favorites of yours is it's called Work for a Reason. That's still available, right?
It is still available. I don't sell that one through my website, is because I just ran out of the inventory. But all the books are available through Amazon or any of the bookstores. They can get every book I've written, except it's called Work for a Reason, through my website. They can even get Shut Up, Stop Whining as a comic book.
That's awesome. The artist who drew you is just fantastic. And you have also illustrations in this book too, drawings and stuff. And I just love how you're drawn.
Well, thanks. Maybe I'm like Jessica Rabbit. I'm just drawn that way.
Well, Larry, this book comes out September 16th. So in 6 days from the time of this podcast, this pre-recorded interview, 6 days from now, people can get this book from LarryWinget.com, Amazon.com, and I'm sure bookstores will have this hopefully featured prominently in the bookstores too.
I bet they will, and I bet it won't be hard for anybody to find it if they walk in a bookstore or go on any of the online bookstores. It's going to be real easy to find. And you're going to see lots more press about it. Go to my fan page on Facebook. You're there. You see the way I mix it up there. It's a lot of fun, and we talk about interesting topics. That's a great place to really get involved in the conversation.
People can follow you on Twitter, too, at Larry Winget. Again, WINGET, the last name, the pit bull of personal development. And I love your Ask Larry videos where they can ask you anything. And tell us about that, because you don't, a lot of people would look at the questions beforehand, spend days, researching and answer, hours anyway. You don't do that, right? You do it right off. You shoot from the hip. You just kind of draw the question, right? Yeah,
I have people send me questions, anything in the world they'd like to ask me that is of pretty much general interest. So your question's not so specific that it only applies to you, but something I can really make a point. And there's a real teaching lesson in there. And they send me their questions. I get lots and lots of questions, but I just sit on my patio with my dogs running around behind me. It's real organic, and it's shooting straight from the hip. I pull that stack of questions out, and I just flip through them, and I'll say, that's a pretty good one. Let's go with it. And I give the answer straight from the hip. There's no planning involved, and it's the raw, unfiltered Larry Winget. I get carried away and get screaming and yelling sometimes. It's a lot of fun.
Well, some of your earlier books, Shut Up, Stop Whining, and Get a Life, People Are Idiots and I Can Prove It, You're Broke Because You Want to Be, which was a very telling book for me. I was going through a lot of stuff when I read that one, and it got me out of a lot of stuff, including a great lesson of yours, which is when you get that stack of bills, pay what you can. I walked away with that, Larry, and it changed my life, because I used to just hide the bills and I'd put them on the kitchen counter somewhere, and next thing you know, you're 6 months behind on stuff. But one of the best pieces of advice I got from that about bill paying is, if you get a bill for $100 and all you can pay is $5, put $5 in the envelope. And, They appreciate that. They rather see $5 than nothing.
That's exactly right. And besides that, that's keeping that line of communication open. I've always, this is sort of a takeoff from that, but if you have a bill, make copies of the bill and copies of that envelope, and then Send in $5 whenever you get it. Like you said, if the bill's $100, send in $5 today, and maybe in 5 or 6 days, you'll have another $5, and you'll have a copy of the bill. You put another $5 in the mail, and just constantly be sending in a little, chipping away on your bills all the time.
Absolutely. Well, the new book is Grow a Pair, How to Stop Being a Victim and Take Back Your Life, Your Business, and Your Sanity. I'm the proud owner of an advanced uncorrected proof autographed by Larry himself. Larry, I'm going to put this right up with your other books on my office shelf here. And what a pleasure, my friend. I still got to get out there one of these days and shake your hand, because I don't kid you when I say this. You and Jim Rohn and Jim Bouchard and Dr. Dyer, you guys are in the top 4. You're really in the top 2, my friend. And I mean that. You and Jim Rohn are at the top of my list. And the fact that I went from just being a fan and, someone digesting all your great lessons in your books to actually becoming friends with you, it's a huge honor. And I hope to shake your hand.
I appreciate you saying that. I really do. And I appreciate us doing this interview here today. I really can't tell you enough how much fun it's been. And you always ask the best questions, and I always have a good time.
Well, I appreciate it, my friend, and I know you're a few hours off from me, so it's late for you, so I'm going to let you go, and I'm glad I got one of the earlier interviews with you, and I'm going to email you tonight and let you know when this is up.
All right, sounds good. I'll let everybody know. Thanks, Spencer.
Okay, thank you, Larry. Take care. I appreciate it. Larry Winget, author of Grow a Pair, How to Stop Being a Victim and Take Back Your Life, Your Business, and Your Sanity, LarryWinget.com, on the internet, also from Amazon.com. It's coming out September the 16th. Look out for this book by Larry Winget, Grow a Pair. Sure to be a bestseller along with all his other books. I'm Spencer Hughes. This has been a special edition of The Spencer Hughes Show, and we'll talk again real soon. Thanks for listening.